Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. China has told North Korean companies operating in its territory to close down as it implements United Nations sanctions against the reclusive state. The companies will be shut by early January. Joint Chinese and North Korean ventures will also be forced to close. China, Pyongyang's only major ally, has already banned textile trade and limited oil exports. The move is part of an international response to North Korea's sixth and most powerful nuclear test. The UN Security Council, of which China is a member, voted unanimously for fresh sanctions on the 11th of September. China's Commerce Ministry said it had set a deadline of 120 days from the passing of the resolution for any North Korean companies within its borders to close. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze if a stern China can discipline North Korea. Joining me on the program today are Ashok Sajjanhar, former diplomat, Raviprasad Narayanan, Associate Professor, Center for East Asian Studies, JNU, and Smita Sharma, Deputy Editor of the Tribune. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. As always, I'd like to start with the lady on the program. Smita Sharma, as far as China is concerned, do you believe that China has done enough to rein in North Korea, and the latest measures, do you think, is going to affect or impact North Korea at all?
We cannot perhaps say that it's not going to have any impact at all, because at the end of the day, almost 90% of the trade that we are talking about for North Korea, the source is China itself. And in fact, China did ban imports of some other items like coal starting from February this year. Also, the North Korean companies, which are pretty high in number, that are operating inside China, they have also been asked to wrap up. They've also been given this sort of time period of 120 days. It's definitely going to impact. But what China has done is, in lieu of these sanctions, it kind of did a negotiation and said that, look, we do not want a direct impact on the people, because if North Korea crumbles, we will have a refugee problem at our own borders, because they do share a long border. Almost 200 trucks go from China to North Korea on a daily basis. So that's the kind of commerce that you're talking between the two. But there are certain items that have been exempted. So, while there will be no petrol export happening to North Korea, crude has been exempted. So we do not know what percentage is dependent on crude there, for all the companies that are operating in there. So I think there is likely to be a lot of skepticism, given that, of course, China has an influence on North Korea, larger than more of the other partners in the region. But at the same time, the questions do remain as to how much, strictly will all of this be imposed.
Fair enough. Ambassador, do you believe that China is the key, really, if the tension in the region needs to be diffused?
Absolutely. I don't think there is any other country which has that sort of influence on North Korea as China has. Not even Russia, definitely not the other neighboring countries. So I think it's always been on China to pull its weight and to exercise its influence. And that is exactly what happened when first time the Chinese president went to the United States. And we know what the rhetoric from Donald Trump as a candidate was against China when the election process was going on. But after that meeting, he cooled down because he thought that China would be able to pull its weight and exercise its influence and put pressure on North Korea. It did not happen. And that is why the dismay and the frustration of Donald Trump. But China is the country that holds the key, as has been mentioned, 90% of the trade. And of course, it has to be done. China says that it does not wish a refugee crisis on its borders, because, the town of 2.4 million Danong, that is the place from where much of the trade, over the land boundary gets conducted. But it's also that it does not wish to destabilize North Korea, because a destabilized North Korea resulting in maybe the unification of Korea would be against the interests of China. And it would always like to use North Korea as a pawn against the United States. So that is a very, very handy instrument in its hand, which it would not like to. That is why we have seen that over this period, it has been dragging its feet. Meaning, what could have been done? Why did China, and supported by Russia, why did when the sanctions on the 5th of August by the United Nations, they were imposed, they said we'll keep crude out of it. Even now, crude is out of that, because that is what really has the potential to hurt North Korea.
But China has said that they're going to limit the supply of crude to North Korea. I think it's limited to about
2 million barrels
yes.
Per year. But then we don't know what is the absolute number, absolute figure. If it was 2.2 million barrels and from there you limit it to 2 million barrels, it's not going to have much of an impact.
True.
So there is, there's such opacity as far as trade relations, links and North Korea and China are concerned. So one doesn't really know what is happening. And also it's said that they are going to limit gas exports to North Korea. There also, what does it mean? Because for any sanctions to be effective, they have to hurt, they have to have the pain, because then only you will have the other country coming to the...
But pain the authoritarian regime, not the people. That's always the tricky area.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
No, that is true. That is true. But I think if there is a pain that is inflicted on, from $3 billion, if their export earnings have come down to $1 billion, then obviously the flexibility that is available to the regime, that also gets very severely constrained and restricted.
Sure. Raviprasad, Narayanan, what has changed in China over the last few days? Because during the BRICS summit, we saw China naming Pakistan-based terror groups, and now they've decided to take some kind of action against North Korea and actually impose the UN sanctions. What's changed over the last few days?
Good evening, Frank. If you would permit me, I'd say the more things change, the more they remain the same. Especially when it comes to China and North Korea, because to begin with, their links are far more deeper than what we all understand. To begin with, the founder of the Kim dynasty, Kim Il-sung, was a member of the Chinese Communist Party. Secondly, Kim Jong-un is brash, but not so brash that he would commit suicide. He knows very well that China is imposing sanctions to satisfy an audience in Washington. And these sanctions are not entirely isolating North Korea, because China still will provide oxygen, so as to say, to the patient in the intensive care unit. Also, North Korea's case is a classic instance of a country that was industrialized. In the late 70s, it had a per capita higher than its southern neighbor, and a country that has internally collapsed owing to various other reasons. And it is that insecurity which predicates any decision taken by the ruling individual concerned. China is putting pressure on North Korea finally to impress upon the Korean leadership that you cannot get away with testing devices when the Chinese are having a multilateral forum of their own, or when the Chinese are conducting an international show of their own. So this is where I feel the Chinese feel the North Koreans have crossed the limits. And in China's case, it always helps to have North Korea as a cordon sanitaire. Because should North Korea collapse, you have American troops at their doorstep. And that is something China would not want. North Korea existing as a nation state with an irrational leadership is in the national interests of China.
Sure. Talking about Kim Jong-un, the world's busy calling him a lunatic, calling him a madman and whatnot. But is there some kind of an understanding between China and North Korea that the others aren't seeing, and all this is a planned strategic move by both the nations?
So there are, populations in the world that are competing to understand the intelligence for both Donald Trump to Kim Jong-un. So it's best left out there. But having said that, look, China has been standing by North Korea right from the 50s during the Korean War. And Ravi here is right, it has been a protector of all the dynasties, be it Kim Jong-un or his predecessors, Kim Jong-il or Kim Il-sung. They have definitely nurtured China, North Korea in a way as an instrument of foreign policy, I say so. Because if you remember the timing of the missile launches that North Korea has done, they have coincided with big events. They have coincided with the inauguration of the OBOR, the Belt and Roads Initiative Summit meeting that was held in Beijing in May. Just as Shinzo Abe wrapped up his India visit, there was another one that flew over Japan into the Pacific. And in fact, at that point in time, one of the advisors to the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who was in Delhi, he seemed to suggest that, look, to assume that this is actually embarrassing China, the biggest trading ally of North Korea, will be wrong, because the more provocative North Korea is, the more importance China will have as an interlocutor in the region. So, for countries like the United States, they'll perhaps have to fall back on China to try and rein in North Korea. Just a little clarification, you brought up that BRICS declaration. I think a lot of hue and cry has been made here in the Indian media. It wasn't a significant shift. Those wordings were used even in the declaration of the Heart of Asia last December, where Pakistan itself was a partner to that declaration. So it wasn't some major shift because China did not change its habit on the Security Council. It continues with its technical ban on terrorists like Masood Azhar. So, of course, it's doing some things, but some of it might be symbolic. And why I added to the ambassador's point was because, it's not a democracy there. It is a repressive regime. And it's not like if the sanctions squeeze people out there, people are going to come out on the streets and protest against the dynasty. So that's not going to be a problem, which is why it's crucial that these sanctions need to hurt the family more than it hurts the people who are already suffering a lot.
Talking about the family and talking about Kim Jong-un, Ambassador, do you believe that China is somewhere deep down concerned about Kim Jong-un himself and his, his maverick behavior?
I'm sure these thoughts must be crossing the minds of the leadership in China, because otherwise they would have, what has happened in the past is that it has been the regime, the leadership has been maverick, but they have also been predictable to a certain extent. But here over the last few months, what we have seen, and some of these incidents happening, for instance, if it happens on the day that the Belt Road Forum is going to take place, I would imagine that this would be embarrassing as far as China is concerned, because it is cocking a snook at China as far as the international community is concerned. And this, in my view, is an indication or what, the signal that North Korea is sending to China, that, we are, that there are fissures between the two of them, that they don't appreciate the pressure that is being applied on them. It might be the pressure is being applied because of the United States, but they are not happy with it, they are not comfortable with it. So I'm sure China also is, and if it was only Kim Jong-un, but here you have a combination, because the rhetoric from both sides, as far as the United States is concerned, and as far as North Korea is concerned, both Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, they seem to be vying with each other to use the choicest of incendiary statements against each other. Meaning he calls him a rocket man and he calls him mentally deranged dotard or something of that sort. This sort of a discourse has never been heard of earlier. But if you permit, just on that BRICS declaration thing, I think BRICS declaration does suggest that China was feeling the pressure, was feeling the heat, because if you look at the declaration last year in Goa, in India, they had very successfully managed to make a very, very sort of a sanitized final declaration. I take the point that it was at Heart of Asia, it was done, but I think the significance and the symbolism of this declaration having been adopted on the Chinese soil under the presidentship of the Chinese president, I think that has much greater salience than something that was adopted on the Indian soil, where only the Indian Prime Minister and the Afghan president were present.
Sure.
So I take the point that this was there, but still I feel that the BRICS declaration is a huge symbolic move forward. That having been said, I also do recognize that on the 6th of September, we had Mr. Khwaja Asif going there and being hugged and feted by Wang Yi, the foreign minister of China. So in that sense, and we really still have to see what China does as far as Masood Azhar is concerned at the United Nations, because that has not come. Not that I'm sanguine that they are going to change their position, no. But I think they are also feeling the pressure, because they have, this is being conveyed also to Pakistan. And that is why you had on the 5th of September, you had the defense minister of Pakistan saying, that this is, we are getting isolated. And if you would recall, the whole that Dawn leaks case last year when Cyril Almeida had reported.
Yes.
And there also the former foreign secretary of Pakistan had said that China is also getting impatient with us, that we might be placing this technical hold or veto on Masood Azhar, but they have told us that it will not be able to, will not be able to continue it for long. So I think this pressure is there, and this pressure is having some result. And I think whether it is here or in the case of North Korea, it is being felt by China also.
Pressure is being felt by China, but you know, Ravi, Smita brought up Abe and Japan. You know, with missiles flying over Japan every now and then, is there a fear of Japan going nuclear anytime soon, because they have the technology, they have the capability? Why not take matters of defense into their own hands?
I don't think Japan will go nuclear, because in domestic politics, crossing the Rubicon when it comes to the nuclear issue is a strict no-no. So Abe will lose his domestic legitimacy if he was to declare Japan going nuclear. It will also, if should that happen, God forbid, it will make Japan a magnet to the adventurism shown by the young man in Pyongyang. And also, Kim Jong-un is irrational, or as Alan Greenspan would have said, he's showing a lot of irrational exuberance when it comes to testing missiles. But there is a rationality behind this irrational behavior, and that is to reach out to the United States and have one-to-one talks. He doesn't believe in the six-party talks. He doesn't believe in brokers in between. He just wants recognition on a one-to-one basis. But sadly, he's talking to the United States as a time when you have an equivalent sitting in the White House, although democratically elected. So it is, as you would say, a dialogue of two characters who speak the same language, maybe in different ways.
With huge egos too.
With huge egos, and one who conducts diplomacy through Twitter and the other through his missiles. So it is a language which only the two of them can understand. And it is Northeast Asia, which doesn't have any security forum as a multilateral expression, that bears the brunt of this kind of a language, intemperate at times, which is unusual, and the insecurities that it builds up and creates further.
Sure. You know, Vladimir Putin, in fact, a few days, a couple of weeks ago, in fact, said that there's no point that in applying pressure on North Korea. It's not going to take us anywhere. Let's sit at the table and talk. Do you believe that that's going to bring about desired results, Smita?
You know, I guess we have to see from where Kim Jong-un is looking at things. The point is, after all these missile tests, the state-run media, in more than categorical terms, put it out there that look, in their view, what happened to Muammar Gaddafi was essentially because he had given up on his WMD, and Iraq was invaded despite not having WMDs. So they are looking at this kind of a scenario where they think that if they give up on their nuclear rights, they will perhaps see some sort of a territorial invasion as well, and this is their best bet to try and keep American troops from entering the territory. If that happens or not, if it's a catastrophe waiting to happen, we don't know yet. But look, China actually backed the first sanction, the UNSC resolution, way back in 2006, once Pyongyang went ahead with its nuclear test. But if you look at the trade figures between China and North Korea, between 2005 and 15, they grew tenfold. So sanctions are in one thing, the relationship is the other thing. Rex Tillerson, the US Secretary of State, is heading to Beijing shortly, where he will also be discussing Donald Trump's, in fact, pending visit to China sometime in November. For Xi Jinping, who has a party congress, a very crucial party congress coming up in November, that's an important factor where he does not want any external distractions right now, which was also seen as one of the reasons why we saw the Doklam, in fact, standoff, kind of get resolved in a peaceful way. It was one of the factors amongst the others. Also, of course, the diplomatic parlays that India had, the back channel talks and all. So there are domestic factors for China right now. For China, the economic growth story has slowed down. They are facing their own issues internally. Xi Jinping has to get a lot of things right. They do not want any major external issues at the moment. And there is international pressure, as the ambassador says. So somewhere they are having to do at least a show of trying to go with the international community at some places where they can, and trying to show that we have offices of influence on North Korea that we are trying to leverage right now.
You know, Ambassador, there were fears just about a few weeks ago that the tension in the region was going to escalate and escalate beyond a tipping point. Can we now safely say that that's not going to happen, and it's just political posturing by all the stakeholders involved? Because you see, Abe has dissolved parliament, his ratings have gone up because of what's happening in North Korea and all that North Korea is doing. So it's nothing but just political mileage that all the stakeholders are getting from it.
You know, if there were, Frank, two tried and tested and mature leaders on the two sides, then one could have made that assessment. Unfortunately, that is not the case, because Mr. Trump has come in with such a large number of assertions and statements, and he's been going flip-flop on several of them. So his the uncertainty and the unpredictability as far as he's concerned, and he's been continuously raising the rhetoric and raising the belligerence, with every successive statement, and so also has it been from the other side. I think the countries which are really concerned are the countries in that neighborhood, whether it is South Korea, whether it is Japan, and even to an extent China. So I think these are the countries which are really concerned that matters should not, of course, the United States is also concerned, the others also, that the matters should not go beyond, they should not cross a certain red line, after which there is no sort of, recall. So in that sense, but I think China will make sure it is going along with the international sanctions, and it is giving itself, so it is in a manner of speaking, hunting with the hounds and running with the hare also. It is trying to keep its relationship with North Korea on an even keel and reassuring it, while also going along with the international sanctions, because it finds that it has no other way. So it is, moving ahead, but still reassuring North Korea. So I would imagine that it is not going to, go beyond the tipping point. I will not say that it is mere posturing, because, any miscalculation could happen. Any miscalculation could happen. That cannot be completely ruled out. But still, I don't think that it is really, at this time, it is that it is going to go beyond.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
At this time, of course, status quo remains. But what's going to happen once the Congress concludes in November? Are things going to change dramatically, Raviprasad Narayanan?
Not exactly, because one reason is that China remains the guarantor of North Korea's stability, however one might define it. And on 18th October, the 19th Party Congress begins, and should Kim Jong-un show some exuberance irrationally while the Congress is being held, that is when the Chinese are going to get very upset. Because in very many ways, if you look at the origin of the North Korean state, you'll find the Chinese hand. Millions of Chinese troops had fought for North Korea to become what it is. And hence, China is symbiotically linked to North Korea and its very existence, and they would go hammer and tongs at defending that. And the Communist Party of China, the Congress it is going to hold, although it is a domestic event, ultimately all politics is domestic.
Yeah.
So Xi Jinping has to keep that in mind when he has to convince those who are going to join the team, the new team that he's going to create, that North Korea is a domestic issue.
Fair enough. Okay, I've got 2 minutes left on the program. Final closing comments from all my guests, beginning with you, Smita Sharma. What do you, what's the way forward, really?
Well, somebody has to snatch that phone away from Donald Trump, if that is possible, so that the fire and fury reigns in a little lesser. And of course, if the Chinese are able to make the North Koreans see some merit in coming to the dialogue table, interestingly, North Koreans don't want, the six-party talks, but the Chinese have actually favored the six-party talks instead of direct talks. So we don't know, fingers are crossed, because anything that happens, a nuclear war in the region, to think that any country is really far away from them to be not affected, it will be a far-fetched dream.
Okay. Ambassador, your closing comments.
Yes, today is the 29th of September, 18th October is the 19th Congress. I don't think, China will definitely make sure that nothing really happens between now and then. And that is why I think it has taken this move to have 4 months, 120 days time, so that, the sanctions don't start hurting right away, right now. It is sort of, and in that sense, it will try to keep North Korea under control to the extent possible, so that it does not really fly
Nothing
off.
boils over.
Nothing boils over. No.
Fair enough. Raviprasad Narayanan, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
It is interesting to note that the Chinese have an approach where they are dealing with North Korea as it was in the past, and these sanctions are not going to bite, especially for a nation that is inured to hardship, except for those who comprise their leadership. Secondly, the moment China withdraws or implements sanctions in force, there is another country that is entering this game, Russia. So it is in China's interest to see that it still holds when it comes to the Korean peninsula.
And keep the others out.
Frank,
Yes.
just quickly add that, let's not forget also that China is invested heavily when it comes to trade today with Japan, with South Korea. And I think, with the trade corridor that's established with North Korea, perhaps we'll see the smuggling corridor also enhance itself further in the days to come.
Okay, all right. On that note, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Ashok, Sajjanhar, Raviprasad, Narayanan and Smita Sharma, thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have today. See you again next time.